So your father says, you're no good. This is the message you get as a child. Well, what happens? Potentially, and there's many ways to interpret many things, as we know, but it's a very good chance you'll grow up, find a job that you despise. Why? Because the job can take upon itself a life of its own and can represent that father. Therefore, you are in that same relationship, and subconsciously you feel you can potentially resolve the shit that went down with your father by being in this particular job position. Maybe your mother ignores you. What happens? Well, potentially you marry someone just like her. And by marrying someone just like her, you get to relive that same dynamic and attempt to resolve it. What is my point here? Well, my point is this goes on and on and on and on and on. It's mainly with parental figures, but not necessarily. Maybe a teacher did something to you. Isn't that right, Chris? When you're really young, and that can stay with you as you grow up and mature. My point is people's lives, generally speaking, for the most part, are a patch job. They are not real lives. Everything and everyone is a metaphor for what you had and did not have. And of course, obviously, I'm speaking in general terms here because sometimes, for example, when I was even 16 years old, before I found God, I never dealt with racial prejudice. And my father was one of the biggest bigots in the history of the human race, and you would think I would have to resolve that. How I escaped that, God only knows, but I did. And sometimes things in our lives, for whatever reason, just don't take root. Nonetheless, as I just stated, most people's lives are a patch job. They have nothing to do with the real entity that's supposed to be. In other words, there is very little you. How does this happen? Well, first there's a hurt. Somebody does something to us. Somebody says something to us. Secondly, because of this hurt, there is a wound. And number three, when you were a child, there's no way in hell. I mean, most adults don't know how to process anything. And the adult world, their idea of processing things is resentment, being stoic, forming a layer over one's psychology or spirituality or lack thereof. But a kid has no mechanisms whatsoever to deal with being hurt. And in fact, if a child is hurt by their parent, essentially what happens, more often than not, is the child tries to blame him or herself. I've seen this again and again and again. I remember when I had this horrible falling out with this family back in the 90s, and I took this child aside and I said, look, are you aware of why this has happened? And he just looked at me and said, I've done something wrong. I said, maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe your parents did something wrong. Maybe everybody in the world did something wrong, but you did nothing wrong. And this is a very, very difficult message because a child wants to feel that their world is safe. And if they're fucking up, that means the world is safe. But a child cannot have their parents as quote-unquote loose cannons. You know, it's just a little bit too much for a child, or a lot too much for a child to take. So there's a hurt. Secondly, there's a wound. Thirdly, bury it. Fourthly, find something to fill it. Anything will do. I mean, my God, some kids, they find themselves back in the mid-90s, early 90s rather. John and I recall dealing with all these young boys who are in relationships with pedophiles. Like, how did this happen? These are good-looking kids from reasonable backgrounds. Well, what happened is they chose this life because they weren't looking to fuck a man. They were looking for a father, and Buddy took liberties to abuse that situation. So there's a hurt, there's a wound, we bury it, and we find something to fill it. Sometimes people will find anything to fill it. The subconscious mind is a very, very strong thing, and it'll override the conscious mind 99% of the time. You know, this is why people develop these really stress-filled, if you look at people's faces, you can see the stress and the torment. Well, why? Well, it's because they developed this life, yet they're trying to protect that life. They're trying to pretend it's another life. And you can see how this can take years off your life. So they embrace this. Number 6, they justify it. If the human race can do one thing, it's justify. In this world, it's all going to shit. Nobody's ever wrong. Number 7, set up a system to make it work. And that's just what I was talking about right there. You know what I mean? People have 2 lives. Sometimes some people have marriages, separate marriages, 2 marriages going on at the same time. And it comes to the surface, this person had 2 separate lives, and everybody's shocked. Well, they shouldn't be shocked because most people have 2 separate lives. It's just these guys took it one step further and actualized it with a 130-pound bag of flesh. So there's no real difference, you know. So we justify it. Number 7, we set up a system to make it work, which is just basically what I said. Number 8, we institutionalize this. What the ultimate for people who are fucked up in this particular way is somehow society gets on the bandwagon. You know, we have the Roman Empire. I guess every man basically was a pedophile. Now, if you're a pedophile because of some sickness and disease, and suddenly everybody else is doing it because it's just a cultural thing to do, well, you're going to be a very happy motherfucker. So people set up a system to make things work. And make no mistake, the subconscious mind is a very, very powerful thing, and it is a brilliant thing as well. And it will find ways to circumvent things to make things work. Unfortunately, sooner or later, your sin will find you out. And I'm not talking about necessarily big sins. I'm talking about, you know, when relationships become an illusion. And that's essentially what they are. They're a metaphor. They're an illusion. They're not real. Well, where is that going to go eventually? I've seen good relationships go to shit. So where are the bad ones going to go? So we institutionalize this rather. And number 9, we violently defend it. I hate to tell the terrorists out there, but the fact that you are violent says you are wrong. Because violence is what someone always clings to when their paradigm, when their worldview, when their way of life is wrong. You can tell how miserable and fucked up and dark and disturbed a person is by their violence. I remember once I was preaching at this Sunday suppers in the South End. And after I preached, these ladies came up to me and ushered me out. And they said, "We got to get you out of here." And I said, "Why do you have to get me out of here?" They said, "That young man over there said he's going to beat you up." I said, "Well, I want to talk to him." So I walked up to him. I said, "Look, do you want to go for a cup of coffee?" He said, "I'm not afraid of you." I said, "Well, fine, that's nice. It's on me, coffee." So I took this young fella actually believed I said having sex with little girls was the greatest thing ever. He actually believed I said that. So I got into his history and taught. His mother, at the age of 5 and 6, was taking him to orgies. 5, 6, 7-year-old child. He was on essentially every street drug there was. And I don't know, I assume he's dead now, but God bless him. So anyway, his response to me was violence, because his whole world was all fucked up, as you can well imagine. And this is always the response. Now, most people's lives aren't that fucked up, I hope. Every time you open the paper, you see something new. Nonetheless, they're pretty fucked up. Never trust somebody who acts out of violence. I don't care if they have the best cause in the world. I don't care if it's save the world or dolphins or whatever. I like dolphins. I think, saving the dolphins is more important to me than saving the human race, to be blunt, because they're far nicer than we are. So let's say save the dolphins. I can't think, maybe, okay, better still, save the spaniels. Okay? Save the spaniels. I love spaniels. Now, if someone has, this is the greatest cause ever, more or less, and if somebody has this cause and they defend it violently, there's something wrong. There's something going on that's wrong every motherfucking time. So let's go through this again. There's a hurt. There's a wound. We bury it. We find something to fill it. We embrace it. We justify it. We set up a system to make it work. We institutionalize this. And number 9, we violently defend it. Here's the scenario, young men and women. You have only one life. You can be you or somebody else. And being who God created you to be will give you joy. Being somebody else, it'll go to shit. Now, it might all go to shit because you win the lottery. People look at people win the lottery and say, oh my God, God's blessing them. No, sometimes God's cursing them. You can't tell. There is a justice, a divine justice. But we always look at what's going on through our own arrogance. So when we see somebody, for example, it's just an obvious example, who wins the lottery, we see this as them being blessed. Because this is the way we see life. Through our eyes, and our eyes must be right because they're ours. Not necessarily so. How do we become us? 9 steps again, 9 dynamics again. Number 1, we find love. Good start, right? Number 2, love reveals all things. Love is not, when 2 teenagers, most of the time, not all the time, fall in love and they don't see anything. Well, it's a hard-on, it's emotions, it's infatuation, and there might be elements of love there, but basically it's not love. Love reveals. And we all have elements of this in our lives. We all have, nobody's love is the love of God. Nobody's love is perfect. So don't be hard on yourself. There's going to be a blindness in all of our lives. But nonetheless, our inclination, our desire, the central core of us is to pursue true love, which is truth, and sees all things. Number 3, be humble and strong. You have to be strong. Humble's obvious, right? Because you got to see, and you won't see if you're not humble. But you got to be strong too, because in the journey back to ourselves, things are going to appear in our lives that are going to be sick. And it takes a lot of strength to how many people here like it when they discover something about themselves that's sick? Anybody like it? I don't even like it unless it's somebody who I trust. I don't even like it when somebody implies something. But I do like it. When I was 17 years old, I was working at camp, and I knew I was a very, very loving kid. But I also knew I had a long way to go, and there was this man there, and I walked up to him. I said, "Look, here's the shit as far as I see it. I'm a kid. I need help. I trust you. When I'm doing something wrong, will you please tell me?" And I was completely open to that. In fact, when I was in first year university, I had this friend. He was quite a bit older than I was, and we had a little Bible study together, just him and myself. And I'm not sure how the subject came up, but he looked at me once and said, "There's something you should know." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "You're proud and you're arrogant." And I began to cry. I knew he was right. See, if I didn't trust him and someone said that, I'd tell them to go fuck themselves. Because I know people have a history of telling me who I should be, and it's been sick and pathetic. I remember when we were dealing with that particular church in Bedford, I had two prophecies over my life. One of them was, stop hiding, and the other one was, God's hiding you. So which one was right? So when this gentleman said this to me, you're proud, you're arrogant, I began to cry. And I said, what should I do to change? So, and that takes strength. It really does. Strength of God. So we find love. Love reveals all things, too. Be humble and strong. Be strong. And not the worldly type of strong, obviously. Not the physical type of strong. Not emotional even type of strong. But strong in the sense that you are open to discover not only the beautiful things about yourself, but the things that aren't so beautiful. Number 4, we find community. This is the hard one. This is the hardest one. We find community to help. Because in North America, as far as I can tell, it is void of healthy community. I'm not going to speak for the rest of the world, but I have yet, in all my travels and all my journeys and all my research, I have yet to find healthy community outside this room, I know that sounds arrogant, in North America. But nonetheless, you need community to help you grow, to help you become. It's very, very painful and awkward and difficult to, and it's so easy to deceive ourselves, you know? So we find community. Number 5, we turn around. There's that word again. I hate using that word, but because the word's been so bastardized. But it's a good word, and the word is repent. You know, stop doing what you're doing. Do something that's good and healthy. You know, it's not a bad word. The fact is, all these religious motherfuckers took that word, completely bastardized it. So now it's there's so many words out there that are basically good words. Like, you know why I was thinking with this the other day. Do you know why the word retarded has become a bad word? Mentally challenged will become a bad word too. Do you know why? It's not the word, it's the people saying it. And their bigotry and their prejudice and their disdain. Suddenly the word is blamed because people can't be blamed, can they? Because people were nice. Okay, in 10, 20, 30 years from now, mark my words, mentally challenged will have to be changed again. Because the fact of the matter is people don't change. They're nasty, snarky, and hate-filled. And the spirit behind mentally challenged will be overwhelming. And it will overwhelm the word. And the word mentally challenged will be blamed. Not people. It's just like when Jesus said to people to grow up and get your head out of your ass. No, it couldn't be us. Couldn't be us. It must be him. So they nailed him to a tree, as Douglas Adams would say. 2,000 years ago, a man said, hey guys, wouldn't it be nice to love each other for a change? And they nailed him to a tree. Turn around. Number 6. Don't expect to be totally changed. Don't expect to be totally free. Some areas of your life, you will be totally free. Like I had for example, this is an easy example. I had a wool rash that got worse and worse and worse every year. You know, to eventually none of my sweaters I could wear without a long sleeve shirt underneath. And then one day it was gone. Just gone. Like that. Well, it didn't make that sound. Like, that's a blessing and a very wonderful thing. But basically, certain things are resolved, but certain things don't go away. We just have to understand that this is a part of us. Oh, this is me again. I'm in this situation. I'm really fucked up in this area, so I'm doing that same shit I did last week. What happened then? I got my nuts fried. Should I do it again? No. See what I mean? See, there's no complete deliverance there. Complete deliverance, like that song by David Crosby. He didn't have to think about right and wrong. He just knew. Hero song. Beautiful song. Be content to know all things about yourself, or be on the path to know all things about yourself. Number 7, then you begin to grow. You become a new person. Jesus said, behold, I make all things new. You will be different. Everyone in this room is different than they were. Beautiful thing. Number 8, see your environment as a representation of who you are becoming. Your environment is no coincidence. The people you find around you, no coincidence. The situations you find yourself in, no coincidence. I wrote a sermon on this. I'm going to preach it soon, God willing, although I don't know when I'm going to preach. Let your environment be your guru. Let your situations be your guru. Learn. Every day, life is crying out to teach you something. And number 9, whatever you do, do it all in love. The Moody Blues, say it in love. Great song. Life is a process of being led to or away from yourself. This helps me to understand failed relationships. Sometimes relationships fail because I fucked up. Sometimes relationships fail because the other person fucked up. Sometimes it's a third party. Sometimes God knows what. And Chantel and I were talking about this yesterday. The mark of maturity is to know what actually went down. Because most people, when they tell you what went down, they have no fucking idea what they're talking about. You know, it goes back to that story. I preached this sermon at Selah in 1996, I think it was. And I used this illustration about things growing in the dirt and shit, and things in the shitting of our lives, and how our lives fall apart and create all this soil and shit and all the rest of it. Beautiful things will grow. And there's this one girl, and I noticed the look on her face. I think it was just an intuition. I think God led me into this situation so I could have this illustration. I said, honey, what was that sermon about? And she looked me square in the eye and said, take no shit off of anyone. Ultimately, it comes down to this. A life of love, a life of truly living love will lead you back to you. Amen.